After major keys, minor keys are the most popular choice for songwriters. The sound of the minor key is often described as brooding, sad, or melancholy. Listen to how it sounds here with the A minor scale, which has the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. The scale you just heard is actually called the natural minor scale. You may also see it labelled as the Aeolian mode or the sixth mode of the major scale. When someone mentions the minor scale or key, they are almost always referring to the natural minor. It is actually one of three minor scales, the other two being harmonic minor and melodic minor. The numbers you saw under the scale are referred to as scale degrees. They provide a point of comparison with the major scale, also known as the Ionian mode. Third will have a major sound, and flat or minor third a minor sound. Another minor sounding mode is the Dorian mode. If you compare it to the Aeolian mode, you'll see that the only point of difference is the natural/flat or minor sixth note. So two notes you really want to focus on in minor riffs are the flat or minor 3 and the flat or minor 6. In the key of A minor, these are the notes C and F. A riff is a short, repeated, memorable musical phrase. Although strongly associated with rock music and the electric guitar, a riff can feature in any genre and be played on any instrument. The majority of riffs are between 1 and 4 bars in length. Any longer can sound like a melody or solo. All riffs are repeated. This is an essential part of the riff and how they hook themselves into the listener's mind. You could also call them a motif. That is, a musical idea that repeats. A riff can define a song. The first thing you hear in many songs is a riff, and they are the core part of many massive hits. Riffs are like a whole song, bundled up into a short, repeatable package. As such, they are comprised of three main parts: rhythm, harmony, and melody. I'll use the A minor scale now to demonstrate some different riff ideas. I'll present guitar tabs for the riffs, but remember that these ideas can apply to any instrument or MIDI. Tabs were created in Guitar Pro. There's a link in the description if you'd like to try out Guitar Pro for yourself. A minor is a guitar-friendly key. In standard tuning, you can play any of the open strings without being out of key. As such, it can open up all sorts of easy-to-play riff ideas. Almost anything can be a riff, but for ease, I'm going to break them into a few categories here to help you think about different riff approaches. The sound or genre that you are aiming for may dictate the riff style that you prefer. As always, trust your ear and go with it. Let's start with some interval-based riffs. An interval is simply the distance between two notes. Intervals are the building blocks of chords and scales. As such, they are a great point to construct a riff from. The bulk of guitar riffs are played on the lower three strings. The E, A, and D strings have power and authority associated with bass notes, as the bass generally defines the harmony above it. Denser strings also produce more volume. Because of this, I'll focus on these lower registers in the examples. If you're working with a scale, such as A minor here, you can experiment by playing two notes in the scale that create an interval you like the sound of. Once you find the interval you like, then you can work on the rhythmic idea for your riff. For example, here is a simple riff using two notes in the A minor scale, A and C. This interval is a distance of 3 semitones or half steps. This is also known as a minor third. I referred to this at the beginning of the video with the scale degrees. I'll play the interval and then develop the rhythm of the riff. So much of the riff writing process is experimentation. Intervals can be played horizontally, like you just saw. This is what you would find in a melody. Or you can stack them vertically. That is when both notes are played at the same time. This is how chords are created. In the next example, I'll play notes from the A minor scale at the same time. Listen to how this changes the sound. Each interval will have an open A note in it. Repeating a note like this in a riff is known as a pedal note. I'll discuss this in more detail later. Look out again for the development of the rhythm in this example. You will have heard in the last example how important the rhythmic element was. The rhythm of a riff is what really makes it unique. A lot of riffs utilise syncopation to generate this rhythmic interest. This is where the weak beats in a bar are accented rather than the usual strong beats. For example, in 4/4 time signatures, there are 4 beats in a bar, Usually the strong beats are 1 and 3, and the weak beats 2 and 4. But if you turn this on its head, then you create a syncopated rhythm. And if you utilize notes that don't fall on any of these beats, then it will feel even more syncopated. You can put a rest and avoid notes where the strong beats fall to further create a syncopated feel. I've shown you some of the notes in the A minor scale, but what creates the minor sound? At the beginning of the video, I explained how the only point of difference between the minor scale and the Dorian mode is the flat or minor sixth note. So this note is critical to the minor sound. You also want to highlight that minor has a minor sound or quality. This is heard through the use of the flat or minor third note, and also the root note of the scale, so you know where the tonic or home is. Here's an example that highlights these notes in the A minor scale: A, C and F. It starts with these 3 key notes, with particular emphasis on A and C to highlight that minor quality. It then introduces some more notes, repeating the rhythmic end of the first bar to provide some cohesion across the riff. The root note A is the lowest in the riff to highlight its role as the tonic. Let's now talk about pedal note riffs. A pedal note is one that remains the same, usually low down in the arrangement, whilst other notes or chords change above it. This will usually use open E, A and D strings on the guitar. If the note doesn't sustain throughout the riff, it may also be referred to as a pedal point. It will often be the root note of the relevant scale that is repeated to really anchor the listener in the key of the song. But it doesn't have to be, so feel free to experiment. If you've heard metal riffs with palm muted E strings throughout, they are an example of this. This might be one reason to try a drop tuning, like drop D, to get a suitable open note to pedal throughout your riff. You saw an example earlier that had a pedal note. Here's one in A minor that again uses the A open string, but also the C and F notes we want to target. Now it's time for a classic riff component, the power chord. A favourite of rock and metal, the power chord is a simple, powerful element in many iconic riffs. A power chord is actually just the perfect fifth interval, so it relates back to the first 2 examples in this video. Power chords are often used with pedal notes that I discussed previously. This is particularly prevalent in metal riffs. On guitar, they are usually played as 2-note chords with the first and fifth, or as a 3-note chord with the octave added above the fifth. If using a distorted guitar sound, you might also find other techniques used with power chords, such as palm muting and slides. A simple starting point for generating power chord riffs is to use the notes in the relevant scale for your song and then using each note as a root note for a power chord. As with other riffs, the rhythmic element is almost more important than the actual chords being played. Here's an example in A minor using power chords and other single note lines. The power chord riff leads us nicely into the full-blown chord riff. As the name suggests, this is simply combining full chords into a riff. This is where the lines between chord progression and riff can become blurred. But as discussed earlier, the riff will be shorter and more rhythmically driven than a chord progression. Chord-based riffs are easy to have a go at. Just pick one or more chords from a key and start experimenting with the rhythm. For example, here are the diatonic chords in the key of A minor. If you want to learn more about minor key chords and progressions, there will be a link at the end of this video. A simple and popular chord progression uses the 1-chord A minor, the 5-chord E minor, the 6-chord F major, and the 7-chord G major. Let's take these chords as the basis of our riff. You can use simple chords like this, but you are not limited. Different chord types can open up interesting sounds. And on the guitar, there can be the simple addition or taking away of a finger. This can add rhythmic elements that help elevate us beyond the chord progression. In the next example, I explore this idea by using A sus2 and G add 9. The rhythmic variations are short enough to feel like a riff and not a progression. So far I've been using notes that are only in the natural minor scale, but riffs don't need to be boxed in like this. You can reach for any notes that you like the sound of. This introduces the idea of modal mixture or modal interchange. This is where you use notes from parallel scales within your riffs. Parallel scales have the same root note as the scale you are using. For example, I've been using A natural minor here, so parallel scales would include A major, A Lydian, and A harmonic minor, amongst others. A lot of riffs aren't considered in this level of detail and created more spontaneously. I'd recommend going for the spontaneous approach to begin with and just reach for notes and sounds that you like. The short nature of a riff won't usually undermine the tonal center of your song. A riff can come into the songwriting process at different times. It could be that you create a great riff in isolation and this inspires you to write the rest of a song. Remember that they contain rhythm, melody, and harmony. This song DNA can be unpicked from the riff and lead to quick songwriting. Concentrate on the notes that are emphasized or stand out. These will lead you to suggested chord changes. You could also take an existing chord progression and turn this into a riff. This might be by using chord notes or whole chords as you saw earlier. Or you could take a song melody and use it for your riff inspiration. This is particularly useful for finding rhythmic hooks for your riffs. Sometimes starting with some limitations can really help your riff writing process as it narrows down infinite possibilities to focus your attention. With that in mind, I'll use a song I've written in other videos on the channel to help inform a riff. If you want to learn how this was written, then watch the playlist at the end of this video. It's in the key of A minor and has a BPM of 97. It starts with a 4-bar intro, which I want to create a riff for. I've used mainly chord notes in the riff with a few extra scale notes. The first 2 bars of the riff set up rhythmic patterns that repeat throughout. This also takes part of the melody rhythm to help build up cohesion through the song. The riff starts with the C and E notes. These 2 notes are in the C major chord and also include the flat or minor 3rd note C from the A minor scale. This helps to anchor the intro with a feeling of being in the C major key, which is designed to disorientate the listener. Watch the chord progression explainer video to learn more about this. It is also just a simple major 3rd interval, relating back to the first examples in this video and reinforcing the confusion over the key. Then the riff moves up to the A note to preview the A minor chord to come and descends back down to the E note. The riff then repeats, but on the second repeat, it goes down to the chromatic G sharp note. This is in the borrowed E dominant 7th chord, which adds a bit of tough tension to the riff. I then reprise the riff over the bridge. All the chords are different, but the riff remains the same. Listen to how the different chords create a different riff experience. Also note how this is a synth-style production. A riff does not have to be created and played on a distorted guitar. Have a listen to how the riff sounds, building up repetition, as well as the rest of the song. I hope this will inspire you to have a go at writing your own minor key riffs. You've learned how to write a minor key riff, but this doesn't mean you'll be able to write a minor key song. Watch the playlist on screen now to learn all about minor key songwriting.